The day seemed ordinary when I arrived home earlier than usual. The sun was setting, casting golden light through the living room window and creating dancing shadows on the walls. I was looking forward to spending time with Claire, my wife, after an exhausting week at work. As an architect, the pressure to deliver projects was always heavy on my shoulders, but I knew that when I returned home, I would find comfort in her smile. As soon as I entered, I noticed an unusual silence. Claire wasn't in the room, and the sound of the phone caught my attention. It was a familiar touch, but something told me this wouldn't be a small talk. I went to the office door, which was ajar, and without thinking, I slowly approached it. Curiosity led me to sneak, and when I put my ear to the door, I was involuntarily pulled into an abyss of emotions. "He doesn't distrust us. He's very naive," I heard Claire say, her light, knowing laugh echoing down the hall. The world around me collapsed in an instant. Adrenaline rose like an untamed fire, and my heart began to beat wildly, as if it were trying to escape my chest. The man's voice on the other end of the line was unfamiliar, but the intimacy with which they spoke was undeniable. "You have to be careful, Claire. I don't want him to find out." The response had a tone of concern, but what hit me most was the carefree way in which she laughed. I was paralyzed, caught in a web of despair and betrayal. Claire, the woman I loved, who promised to be faithful, was there, cheating on me with someone I didn't even know. I know, but the thrill is so good. I can't resist it," she said, and the brightness in her voice was like a dagger thrust into my heart. What hurt me most was not just the betrayal, but the realization that I was a mere detail in her life, a background figure in the scene of a film she was starring in with another. With my stomach churning, I knew I couldn't just walk in and confront her. It wasn't what I wanted, not yet. Anger and pain mixed in me, forming an intense desire for revenge. A plan began to form in my mind, a dark idea to unmask her, to expose the truth so she could no longer live in her fantasy. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm that was forming inside me. The conversation continued, and every laugh she laughed seemed to hit me like a punch in the stomach. I needed time, information, something that could help me build my path to the truth. But to do that, I needed to be methodical, patient. "Of course, after this is all over, we can meet more often." "No one will know," Claire said, her voice now whispery, almost conspiratorial. A chill ran down my spine. She was talking about a future that didn't include me. I backed slowly away from the door, each step a battle against the urge to barge in and demand answers. The decision was made. I wouldn't confront her now. I would do something more subtle, more effective. He needed to find out everything he could about this betrayal before he acted. The pain still burned in my chest, but a growing determination began to take its place. Claire didn't know it, but this game was just beginning. After the revelation, what I felt was a mixture of shock and anger. Claire, the woman I trusted, was betraying me. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but the other part knew I needed a plan, something better thought out than a simple tantrum. I had to be smart, and that meant investigating. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hours dragged by as I reviewed the conversation in my mind. As soon as the day dawned, I was determined to find out the truth. I started looking through Claire's social media. The messages were subtle, but there was something there that confirmed my suspicions. I found photos of her at a work event where she was surrounded by colleagues, including Tom, the unfortunate guy who was stealing my world. With each image I saw, my stomach turned. One in particular made me feel like I was being stabbed. Claire laughing, her eyes shining in a way I haven't seen in a while. I decided I needed someone I trusted. Jake, a friend from work, has always been a good source of advice. We met at a cafe near the office, and as we drank coffee, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "Hey, Ethan, you seem a little out of sorts. Is something wrong?" Jake asked, with a worried expression. "Oh, just work stuff," I replied, looking away. I didn't want him to know the pain he was going through. Then, an idea emerged. "Have you had any experience dealing with cheating?" Jake frowned. "Treason? Why do you ask that?" "I'm just curious," I lied, forcing a smile. "What would you do if you knew someone close to you was being scammed?" He sighed, looking out the window. "Well, I'd say the best way to deal with this is to be honest. Confront the person and set the record straight. Yes, of course, I murmured, thinking about how I could use this sincerity to my advantage. But what if you wanted to make sure you had all the proof before you acted? Jake looked at me with a puzzled expression. Then you need to be careful. Collect evidence, observe, and then act. But, Ethan, this can be complicated. You don't want to end up hurting yourself more. I know, I replied, trying to hide the truth that burned inside me. I didn't just intend to protect myself. I wanted Claire and Tom to feel the weight of what they were doing. Thanks, Jake. I'll think about it. As we talked, my mind was already formulating a plan. After Jake left, I came home and started strategizing. The feeling of power that came with the idea of unmasking Claire and Tom was almost intoxicating. I knew I needed to be careful, but there was a determination growing inside me. That night, as the city fell asleep, I found myself sitting at the table, surrounded by papers and notes. What I needed now was to find a way to arrange a meeting with Tom, and thus finally get the information that would allow me to confront them. Revenge was brewing in my mind, and I was prepared to play the game. The bar was dark and stuffy. A mixture of laughter and hushed conversations filled the atmosphere. I sat in a strategic corner, far enough away to not be recognized but close enough to hear. My heart was racing. A whirlwind of emotions consumed me. There was Tom, Claire's lover, carefree and laughing, as if life was treating him kindly, while mine was falling apart. He seemed so normal, so ordinary, and it irritated me. When I walked in, I knew I needed to stay calm. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins, but I couldn't let myself be carried away by anger. I went to the bar and ordered a beer, trying to act naturally. My eyes were fixed on Tom, who was sitting with a group of friends, and I soon realized that the conversations revolved around Claire. It was as if she was present, even without being there. She's amazing, man. You don't know how she makes me feel, I heard Tom say, a wide smile on his face. The words cut me like a knife. What did he know about what we had? What did he really feel about her? What made me even more uneasy was the way he spoke, almost loving that clandestine relationship. Have you ever seen the way she looks at you? It's like you're the only one in the world. One of Tom's friends continued, and I could almost hear my heartbeat in response to those words. Anger and pain mixed within me, forming an internal storm. You have no idea how much I want this to last. She's perfect, and I can't let that slip, Tom stated, and I squirmed in my seat. Perfect? Claire? I remembered every moment, every smile we shared. How could he be so blind? I took a deep breath, trying to control the fury that threatened to explode. The need for revenge was firmly in my heart. I wasn't there just to listen, but to plan. He needed more information, something he could use against them. What else would he say, if I had the chance to provoke him? He was now talking about the encounters they had had. That hotel on the corner of 2nd Avenue was the best. The view was breathtaking, and she was so, well, you know how she is, he said, laughing. Those words were like a punch in the stomach. It was a place I knew, a place we had been to together, a place where I thought we were happy. You should meet her kids, they're adorable, commented one of Tom's friends. What? Children? Claire never mentioned that part, and it made me feel like I was being strangled. What else didn't I know? What else had she hidden from me? She always talks about what a great guy her husband is, but I don't think he has any idea what's going on, Tom said, and I squirmed again. He was so convinced that he was on top, that nothing could go wrong. His naivety was almost funny, if not tragic. The conversation continued, and I listened intently, absorbing every detail. Tom's words were like weapons I could use. Every laugh, every memory he shared reinforced my determination to expose the truth, not just for me, but for everyone Claire had deceived. I got up to go to the bathroom, but before I left, I looked at Tom one last time. He was so carefree, so oblivious to what was about to happen. The hate and pain inside me solidified into one plane. I couldn't let him get away with it. Claire needed to know that I knew, and that she couldn't keep living this lie. I left the bar, with a lighter heart and a focused mind. What I had heard gave me a new purpose. Like an architect who draws his project with precision, I had a plan, and I was determined to execute it. Revealing the betrayal would not just be a personal revenge. It would be a public unmasking. Claire and Tom couldn't continue to live this farce without facing the consequences. The day had dawned cloudy, as if the sky was reflecting my mood. Anxiety pulsed through my veins as I prepared myself for what would be the decisive moment. The recording I had made the night before was still echoing in my mind, Claire and Tom's every word repeating itself like a mantra. "He doesn't distrust us, he's very naive." The phrase cut me like a sharp knife, and I was determined to show the true face of betrayal. With my heart racing, I organized the environment. The plan he had meticulously drawn up over the past few days was about to come to fruition. I invited Claire over for dinner, saying I wanted to discuss some ideas about an architectural project we were planning together. It was the perfect hook to bring her closer, without arousing suspicion. Meanwhile, I had arranged with Tom that he would appear, without Claire knowing that I was behind everything. When Claire arrived, she was radiant, as always. She wore a blue dress that accentuated her curves, and her smile was infectious. "Ethan, I'm glad you decided to do this. I needed some time alone with you," he said, hugging me warmly. The scene was so normal, so habitual, that it almost made me hesitate. But I remembered the betrayal, the pain I had felt when I heard her on the phone. That Claire who appeared before me was not the real one. "Come on, let's start preparing dinner. I made a special reservation for us," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tension was palpable. The smell of the food I had cooked mixed with the aroma of betrayal in the air. As I cut the ingredients, I thought about how surreal it all was. The love I had for her now turned into a battlefield. At 8 p.m., Tom arrived. He was dressed casually, but there was a sparkle in his eyes that betrayed the confidence he had in his relationship with Claire. The atmosphere was charged with expectation. Claire greeted him with a smile that made me feel like an intruder in my own home.
Torne.
"Glad you came. Ethan was telling me about a new project he's working on," she said, with a tone of enthusiasm that made me even angrier. "Yeah, a really interesting project," I said, trying to control myself. "But what really matters here is our conversation." Claire gave me a curious look, but I just smiled, maintaining the mystery. Dinner proceeded uncomfortably. As we made small talk, I felt the adrenaline rush through my body, knowing that at any moment I would reveal the truth. Finally, the moment has arrived. After the meal, I suggested that we sit in the living room for a drink. With a drink in hand, I motioned for Tom to talk about his outlook on life. He innocently began to describe how he felt about Claire, how amazing she was, and how much he loved her. With each word that came out of his mouth, my desire to expose everything grew. "Claire, you have no idea how special you are to me," Tom said, looking into her eyes with an intensity that irritated me. "I know this is all complicated, but when I'm with you, the world seems perfect." He smiled, and I felt like it was the perfect moment. With a quick gesture, I grabbed the remote control and activated the recording I had made, the sound echoing around the room. "You can't be serious. Ethan is just naive," Claire said, laughing nonchalantly in the recording. Her smile instantly disappeared when she realized what was happening. "What is that?" His voice was shaking, and I could see his face redden.
Surprise, Claire.
"Now we all know the truth," I declared, my voice steady as adrenaline pulsed through me. Tom looked at me, perplexed, while Claire tried to compose herself. The shock on their faces was indescribable, and I felt powerful, finally in control of the situation. The scene unfolding before me was a mosaic of emotions. Betrayal, disillusionment, and the truth finally exposed. "Ethan, I can explain," Claire exclaimed, but I wasn't willing to listen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was a mix of anger and relief. What I feared most had come true, but now I had the weapons I needed to fight for my dignity. "No, Claire. The only explanation I want is why you decided to cheat on me with a man you considered a friend," I replied, and the tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. The game had changed, and I was prepared for whatever came next. The scene was set, and I knew that, from that moment on, nothing would be the same as before. With the recording in hand, my heart was pounding, not only from the adrenaline, but from the certainty that I was about to unmask Claire. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that was boiling inside me. I needed to be firm, but I didn't want to lose my composure. Claire stood in the living room, her face illuminated by the soft light of the lamp. She was sitting on the sofa, looking at her cell phone, absorbed in her thoughts. I could feel the tension in the air, as if a storm was brewing. I decided it was time to act. "Claire," I called, in a voice that tried to remain calm. She looked up, surprised. "We need to talk."
Ethan.
"What's wrong?" She tried to hide her uneasiness, but I saw the nervousness in her eyes. "I have something important to show you." I pointed to the cell phone in my hand, the weight of the recording almost pulling me down. "Do you remember the conversation you had with Tom? The one where you said I was naive?" Her face turned pale, and I knew the game had changed. "Ethan, wait. It's not what you think." "No, Claire," I interrupted, voice shaking with the mixture of pain and anger. "I heard everything. You and Tom laughing in my face, talking about how I don't suspect anything." She stood up, her expression of despair growing. "That's not fair. I can explain." "Explain? How can you justify the unjustifiable? You cheated on me, and not with just anyone, but with a coworker, someone you know I know." I was just confused." She gestured, as if those words could fix what was broken. "I didn't want that to happen." "Confused? You were laughing, Claire. Laughing at me. I'm not the idiot you think I am." I took a step forward, feeling the adrenaline rush. "I deserve better than that. I deserve respect. Please, Ethan, think about our children." She begged, her voice breaking. "I'm thinking about them, and that's exactly why I can't be by your side anymore. You destroyed the trust we built." Claire seemed small in the face of the truth that now surrounded her. "So what do you want? A divorce? Is that what you want?" "Yes," I replied, my voice firm, "and I will fight for every penny we have. You can't just use our money to finance your romance while I work hard to support our family." She looked at me, her eyes teary, but there was no more room for compassion. The scandal was beginning to spread, and I knew that people would soon know the truth. The whole town would know about her betrayal, and I couldn't care less. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice shaking. "No, Claire. I'm already feeling stronger with each passing day." The truth was that I was beginning to free myself. The pain was still there, but there was a new feeling of empowerment growing within me. "I'm going to move on, and you're going to have to face the consequences of your choices." With that, I left the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The silence that followed was deafening. From that moment on, it was time to live my new life. The lawyer's call about asset division could have been the next step, but I no longer felt trapped. Claire had chosen her path, and now I was ready to follow mine. The courtroom was packed, and the heavy air seemed to condense around me. I always thought this day would come, but I never imagined the emotion would be so intense. Claire sat across from me, with an expression of apprehension I hadn't seen in weeks. Her defensive stance, arms crossed over her chest, was a reflection of the vulnerability she was trying to hide. All around me, friends and acquaintances exchanged furtive glances, and I could feel curiosity and judgment hovering in the air. "Mr. Ethan, are you prepared to present your evidence?" asked the judge, breaking the tense silence that filled the room. I nodded, but my mind was in a whirl. The recording I had made, the cry of truth that would echo off the courtroom walls and into our hearts, was my only weapon. Claire looked at me, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was a mix of anger and sadness in those eyes that once enchanted me. "Ethan, please think about what you're doing," she said, her voice low but full of emotion. "We have kids. This could ruin everything." And the truth hurt. I didn't want to do this, but I couldn't live in a world of lies any longer. "Claire, you made your choice. Now it's time to face the consequences," I replied, trying to remain calm, but with my heart racing. When my lawyer stood up to play the recording, I could hear the murmur in the room intensifying. He pressed the button on the recorder, and suddenly Tom's voice filled the room. "She's just naive," he said, laughing carelessly. "She has no idea what I'm doing with her money." The expressions around me changed. I looked at Claire, and for the first time, I saw a trace of despair on her face. The recording continued, and I felt every word like a blow. "She really thinks she can keep me and still be happy with that idiot," Tom was saying, his voice echoing like a damned echo. Claire squirmed in her seat, her face pale. "You can't do this, Ethan. This is treason." The indignation was clearly present in her voice, but I knew the real betrayal was hers. "I'm just revealing the truth, Claire," I replied, feeling a rush of liberation as I spoke those words. "You put yourself in this situation." The judge, attentive, watched every movement. Finally, he said, "This recording is admissible as evidence. Let's proceed." The room was dead silent, the tension palpable as the judge reviewed the documents and evidence I had gathered. At the end of the session, the judge turned to us and announced his decision. "Based on the evidence presented, I rule in favor of Ethan regarding custody of the children. Claire, you will be ordered to pay a significant amount for the misuse of funds that belong to the couple." A wave of relief flooded my body. I had one. But more importantly, I was finally free. Claire, on the other hand, seemed to fall apart. His coldness had dissipated, and tears were streaming down his face. She looked at me with a mix of anger and despair. "You're going to regret this, Ethan," he whispered, his voice barely audible but full of venom. "I don't regret anything, Claire," I replied, my voice firm. "That was your choice. Now it's time for you to live with the consequences." As the bailiffs led her out, I could see the look of contempt that the other members of the room were casting her way. Claire was alone, surrounded by her own betrayal, and I, on the other hand, felt a sense of renewal. Life was starting again. I had overcome the pain, and now I had the chance to rebuild everything. With my children by my side, I knew I could start over. After all, true freedom is what comes when we free ourselves from the chains of betrayal.